Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have two stories for you from the ProRevenge subreddit. Before we start that, if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's completely free and you can always change your mind later. But if you stick around, my friend Carmen here just might have some cookies for you in the near future. Alright, on to the stories. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from the Vinaya. Landlord screwed with the wrong tenant for too long. This will be decently long as it needs some context. I'm going to throw in a lot of stuff to make it all easier to understand as well. I put an asterisk where the story proper starts in case anyone wants to skip the preamble. Minor details might not be entirely accurate as I've no interest in a revival of this conflict on any level. I won completely, and any resurrection can only taint the experience. We'll start off by noting that I spent about 2 decades working in security. During that time, I worked many different types of security in many different locations. The one that matters for this story was time spent in the rental housing tribunal in a major city, as a kind of bailiff. For those not knowing what that is, think a courtroom in a major city anyway. In a smaller town, it'll probably be an event room in a hotel or a community center, as you'd see on TV, but with less formality and an adjudicator instead of a judge. They functionally are the same thing to landlords and tenants, but they definitely aren't the same thing. This place exclusively deals with landlord and tenant disputes, and is the only place to resolve landlord and tenant disputes. Note that I wasn't a bailiff and it wasn't a court, but these terms most accurately describe the situation and my place in it. For 2 years, I worked at the rental housing tribunal. It was early in my time in security. I was 18 to 20-ish. Being as it was a major city, the sheer number of cases I sat through was beyond my ability to count. I saw everything there was to see. No one is capable of surprising me with a story because I've seen them all, in detail, as a side duty of mine was to ensure all parties had copies of all evidence being presented. I did a lot of photocopying and always read and inspected everything I copied to ensure nothing got cut off or made illegible. By the time I stopped working there, I probably knew the way everything worked well enough to be an adjudicator myself. Well, no, obviously not, but I'm certainly in no need of a lawyer either should I ever have the need to go there. I also had intimate knowledge of how the system worked beyond the actual rules. Like, for example, adjudicators would always give a little leeway to anyone representing themselves over someone who had a lawyer, or how pissed off adjudicators would get when a party was speaking out of turn. Seriously, do not do that. Skip forward almost a decade, I left the city and am in a fairly large town in the same province, same tenant laws. I have a few roommates in a decently sized townhouse. We get along well, but there's a problem. Only I can write checks, and our paydays don't line up. So I'm the one who pays the rent, and I usually can't do it on the first because roommates don't usually all pay in time. We advise the landlord we might be a day or two late, but we'll always have it by the 3rd at the latest. They have no problem with it at all. I spoke to them myself. For about a year, this works fine. No complaints from landlord because even if we're often a day or two late, we always pay. We're also fairly quiet and don't damage the property. Nearly model tenants. I do not actually have any idea why, but one day this changed. I suspect a different person in the company started overseeing the region. One day, suddenly, we got a summons to the rental housing tribunal, hereafter to be referred to as RHT, on the 2nd of the month for failure to pay rent. This doesn't actually lead to a case because we paid the same day. But now, we have to pay the application fee the landlord paid in order to serve the summons. I beat to the neighbor who was also the superintendent and eventually heard back that their contact at the company was now demanding 1st of the month with no exceptions. Well, that really didn't work for us, so we probably had to pay that fee 15 to 20 times over the next 2 years. I could have gone to tribunal over it, but we were technically without a leg to stand on, and I knew it. Maybe if I went enough times, I can ding them for harassment, but I don't have time for that, and my roommates don't care. After being split between us all, the fee wasn't enough deterrent to change our behavior, so we accepted it. If this was the only issue, there wouldn't be much story though. At around the same time the rent leeway vanished, so did mandatory maintenance. I'm not going to list everything that went wrong and wasn't fixed, you'll get a decent idea at the end. We suffered through it. We were all working too many hours at crap pay to be able to actually do anything about it. We adapted. But after about 2 years, it broke. Everyone but me up and moved out for various reasons within a 4-month period. I'm not going into details on my roommates at all because things kinda exploded for a couple different reasons outside of this. No reason to dig any of that up. I had been saving up a while and was able to quit my job without having to immediately get another, so I suddenly had a lot of time. I didn't want to stay and pay the rent by myself or have to find new roommates I could live with, and with my experience in the RHT, I knew I had the landlord by the balls. So I went for them. I stopped paying rent. Annoyingly, I didn't get a summons the first month, but I did the second, so I went. With a meticulously documented plethora of evidence of failure to maintain the property and entering the property without formal notice. I had a copy for the landlord and a copy for the adjudicator. I know from experience that technically you're supposed to give the other party the evidence before the tribunal, but I also knew about that leeway an adjudicator gives to those who represent themselves. So I didn't give the landlord the evidence until our case came up. 100% total ambush. They argued they were ambushed, but the adjudicator just dismissed the case, dressed me down a little, and told me to file my own summons as I should have done. This was the petty revenge. The landlord and lawyer drove 3 hours to get there for nothing. Worse than nothing. I filed my own summons and the big day shows up. It's been about 4 months of me not paying rent at this point. I'm prepared to if I lose, but I don't think I'm going to lose. The whole thing could not have gone better. I had 20 to 30 pages of evidence and 20 odd photographs. They had nothing. They had no actual defense for our water heater being out for 6 months or us not having a fridge for a year. Just to mention 2 severe issues. Their entire defense rested on us being late for rent, which actually worked against them once that led to the adjudicator learning how many times we'd paid the application fee, and lies that had no evidence to support them. They even talked over me a few times, and I saw in his eyes the one time I opened my mouth to protest during their turn to speak, but forced myself to shut up with every gram of willpower I had, so only a squeak came out. The adjudicator respected me. He had no respect for the landlord. I had won on every possible front. The only question was, how much? It was more than I'd ever seen. I got 9 months of free rent, and the landlord was ordered to have everything fixed before the next month was over, or I'd get more. I gave notice I was leaving at the end of the 8th month and left at the end of the 9th. Because the landlord had never renewed the lease, I didn't have to give him the 3-month notice the lease specified. If you want a figure to put to it, I basically got a $13,000 judgment in my favor, adjusted for inflation and rounded. I also made the landlord and lawyer drive 3 hours, twice, only to lose. The landlord's face was so red at the end, I thought he'd have a heart attack. He didn't though. Bye, Mark. OP added a quick edit down at the bottom. It says, edit to clarify a few things based on questions. I also want to add, for those good landlords out there, I do feel you. My time in the RHT was eye-opening. For every bad landlord, there are 30 bad tenants easily. There's a massive debate of debates to have over the whole thing. I'll only say that I do sympathize with the good landlords out there. I'm not trying to paint all landlords as terrible. This is the only landlord I've ever had that was so useless. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Molly Gadeva. It says, I find it odd that the other party has to pay the filing fee. In the US, the other side only pays if they lose, and the fee is included in the judgment. OP responded to this one and said, in the RHT, I can't speak for any courts. The application fee is always paid by the applicant. If I remember correctly, technically, the application fee isn't automatically assigned to the losing non-applicant party, but if the applicant or winning party asks for it, it will be part of the judgment. In practice, the applicant always requests the fee back. My experience told me there was no hope in fighting it except in a harassment case, but doing that would require going to the RHT multiple times and taking multiple days off work to do so. Too many days. And losing every case until I was able to pull out the harassment card. I didn't even intend to bring it up at the tribunal because I felt it was a weak and petty thing to bring up, and I knew what adjudicators thought of weak and petty things, but it happened anyway. I can't honestly say it changed anything. I got the distinct impression that I got about as much of victory as was possible to get without going to actual court in a follow-up. But it was obvious the adjudicator didn't think much of their actions. I wasn't prepared to try actual court, that was outside my experience, and in the grand tally, I already was way ahead. It's pretty obvious that your landlord didn't know what they were up against when they tried to take you on. Using your previous experience really helped out in this case. Unfortunately, most people don't have that experience and thus can't take on their landlord in the same way. Now, don't get me wrong, not all landlords are bad. We had one really good landlord a while back ourselves, and honestly, if you find a good one, you want to stay with them as long as you can. This story comes to us from PredTech. Stick me with hidden charges? I'll show you. So this past Christmas, my missus and I purchased one of our 9-year-old son's Santa gifts from a certain UK sports retail company that also have many stores here in Ireland as well. It was a football rebounder, kind of like a trampoline that you kick the ball at and it bounces back to you. Anyway, we purchased it from their Irish website and thought nothing more of it. A few days go by and we get a notification from a certain brown uniformed courier company that there are customs charges due on something. And as you can imagine, we've bought many things for the kids, so we had to double check what we've ordered, and we didn't have anything left that was being imported. So we naturally assumed it was a scam. So I told the wife to call the company and find out who shipped it, and it was a different courier company based in the UK. After a bit of digging and investigating, it turns out that it's our rebounder. They had shipped it from the UK via a local carrier to the brown uniformed guys to deliver to us. Now, my wife and I are both on disability, so an additional charge of almost €50 when you're both already on a fixed income is harsh, especially at Christmas. So I told her to pay it and I'd deal with the retailer. The first day I called, I had to call 3 times, being stuck on hold for at least 20 minutes each time. But I was patient and polite because I've worked in a call center before, so I knew those people are only doing their job. But I asked to speak to a manager and was promised a call back each time. That never happened. The second day was quite similar. The third day, I was starting to get annoyed, so called back, waiting even longer on hold, and finally wasn't taking this crap any longer. I told the rep that all I wanted was the €50 back, because our consumer rights in Ireland dictate that a person must be informed of any additional charges on a purchase, at the very latest, by the final checkout screen. And in this case, there was nothing to show that, and I could easily replicate that issue by putting the same item in my basket and going all the way to the checkout screen again. And there was nothing saying we'd have to pay import charges. The rep was indifferent to the situation, but tried to help, and what he said sent me over the edge. He offered me a measly €20 gift voucher to use on their website. But more importantly, he read a statement to me. He said, "We advise our customers that there may be DDU charges, delivery duty unpaid, customs charges, on any item that gets shipped outside of the UK." Then I asked him where it states this information, and he paused, then said he didn't actually know. I said, "Well, I know one thing. It doesn't say it anywhere on this transaction, because I've checked, and because this is a violation of my consumer rights. I'm going to give your company one last chance to make this right. Have your manager call me within the next 60 minutes, or I'm going to post this entire debacle on LinkedIn. and link every senior officer in your company. Then I hung up the phone and waited. Yet again, no call. The next day, I went on LinkedIn and followed through on my promise. I created a post detailing what they had done by sticking us with hidden charges, and that they were ignoring our request for a manager, and everything they said and did. Then, I tagged every senior officer at that company, from the regional managers through the European directors all the way to the CEO, and I shamed them for how they operate their company. This, ladies and gentlemen, was now an act of war. Shortly after I posted that, I noticed that they took down the item from their website in an attempt to hide this, but they must have thought I'm a simpleton that doesn't understand how the internet works. They didn't realize that when you searched for a rebounder on their site, that it shows the item in question. So I took a screenshot of that, then another of the item page that was now missing. But then I did a Google cache search for the same page and found a version from 2 days prior happily showing the item. Then I added a comment to my original post highlighting how they were trying to hide it, with the evidence, and trolling them for their heinous behavior, especially at Christmas. Then I tagged and shamed all the senior officers again, and at this point, it was really starting to get some attention. Not only publicly, but 3 people in incognito mode viewed my profile. I wonder who they could have been. So naturally, I took a screenshot of the 3 mysterious visitors listed on my profile and did the same thing. Commented on my own post, highlighting it and trolling them for their incompetence. The next morning, I got a call from a senior executive at their head office in the UK, practically licking my boots with apologies, asking what she can do to make this right. I told her I originally only wanted my €50 back, as it wasn't fair, nor even legal, that I had to pay it. But since I had to go to such lengths to get their attention, now I wanted my €50 back, a full refund on my entire purchase, and I wanted to keep the product. That was the only thing that would make this go away. She asked for a couple hours to fix it, and I said, okay. About an hour later, I got another call from her again apologizing. She asked for my PayPal address where she sent the €50. Then she refunded the whole purchase, and she let us keep the product. Obviously, I thanked her for her help because at that stage, I was just happy it was over. But I'll be effed if I'll let anyone walk all over my family, even if they are a £58 million annual company. The moral of the story here is, don't take BS from anyone. I may just be one man, but my son's view of Santa is far more valuable to me than the opinion of some retail chain that doesn't care about its customers, nor how it operates ethically. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Jinx. It says, congratulations on finding a worthwhile use for LinkedIn. Opie responded and said, laugh out loud, yeah, I agree. I set up a profile years ago and haven't used it until now. Another commenter down below called RacyRe3 says, holy crap, this was so awesome. Using LinkedIn, bloody brilliant, and now filed away in my evil B file. Cheers. OP responded to this one and said, you're very welcome. Don't ever be afraid of big companies. That's what I've learned from this experience, and I'll never bow down to one again. If they act the bollocks, then hold the highest members of the organization responsible. It'll definitely get gears turning. I love how the age of social media really changed things, and now companies can be held accountable for when they do crappy things like what happened to OP here. Back in the days before social media, what did the company really care? Oh, you're gonna be angry at me? What are you gonna do? Tell your book club? Okay. These days, if a company pisses off the wrong person, millions of people will know about it almost instantly. That's absolutely crazy.